Welcome, everyone, to the podcast Stories Across the Table. I am so fired up. This is our initial podcast, our welcome podcast. I think you're going to be super excited. The stories we're going to tell from our guests and they're going to tell are going to inspire you, they're going to motivate you, educate you, and you're going to love it. And you know, the most important part of this is my wonderful co host. I've done over 900 shows podcasting, and this wonderful lady, I love her to death, asked me during Christmas, during the December holiday in 2025, why don't we co-host a podcast and talk about stories? And I'm like, I'm all in, raising my hand, let's do it. So I want to welcome my co-host, Bridget. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. I'm so delighted to be here. You know, when we did get to meet, and we both love inspired journeys. We love stories across the table, and we love it when people have just extraordinary situations, circumstances, backgrounds, and they're willing to share. So this is going to be fantastic. I'm so delighted that you and I got to meet, and now we get to do something extraordinary together.
Well, speaking of stories, can you tell us your story?
Sure. So part of my story is that I had three sets of parents by the time I was 6 months old. So I was adopted and had extraordinary parents. The only thing is being adopted, I was always had this little wound in the back of my mind and heart. And it was like, what made them want to give me up? Wasn't I good enough? Wasn't I pretty enough? Wasn't I smart enough? And it was just that little thing in the back of my mind, but it actually translated into a lot of behaviors when I was younger. And so I spent a lot of time just really trying to prove myself. And when I went to college, I was really trying to prove myself. I was working three jobs and going to school. And the people I wanted to please the most were my parents. But this little voice inside my head was also like, you better prove yourself because the big people always leave. And so when I found myself failing, when I started to struggle in school and I was struggling financially, and my health started to deteriorate, like I was a runner and an athlete and a bodybuilder, but I started not feeling well. And I lost 30 pounds in 3 days. I had no idea what was going on, but I went home to see my mom. And I'm driving through the canyon on $5 of gas I put in my pickup, and just feeling like I am the worst of the worst of the worst, and dragged myself to the doorstep of the woman that I wanted to please the most. And she took one look at me. She said, I'm taking you to the doctor right now. I was so emaciated and so sick, and unconsciously so. I just knew I didn't feel good. I wanted mom. She took me to the doctor and I collapsed right there in the office. And they rushed me into emergency surgery. Luckily, the hospital was right next door. They pumped me full of all kinds of intravenous antibiotics because they couldn't even get a regular IV in. But what we didn't know was that I was allergic to one of those antibiotics and it was killing me. So instead of getting better and better, I was growing worse and worse. And I knew it when I heard a couple of nurses outside in the corridor, and they're talking about me. And they said, I think we better call her mom back because she's not going to make it until morning. And it was at that very moment when I realized I'm dying. Like I have all these hopes and dreams and other things, and I'm not going to be here. And I was really sad. And I remember thinking, what is there? What is even there on the other side? And I had grown up believing in God, but I didn't feel that God believed in me. And then I had this beautiful presence that filled my hospital room with so much light and so much unconditional love. And he told me I was being given a second chance at life. And the whole room was vibrating. My skin was vibrating. The tray table was vibrating. It was extraordinary. And just that love. He didn't care how much debt I was in. He didn't care about my grades. He didn't care about my failing relationships. He just loved me for me. And from that point, I fell asleep. My fever went down. The nurse comes in early in the morning, as they do, and she's bringing in more of those intravenous antibiotics. And I said, hey, I can have every single one of them, but not this one. She goes, "What are you talking about? We thought we were going to lose you last night." She's thinking I'm, one French fry shy of a Happy Meal. And I'm like, "No, I cannot have this one." It was the first time I ever spoke up to an authority figure, especially in Western medicine. And she said, "Okay." And she left to tell on me to the doctor. But fortunately, this doctor had had other experiences with patients and near death. And he said, "Well, we'll take her off this one. We'll see how she does." And I walked out of that hospital within 24 hours on my own power. And Steve, the most important thing that happened was that that story, that situation, that presence, that love changed the story I was telling myself. And I could look into the mirror for the very first time in my life and see love there. And then the coolest thing was I was no longer afraid of people. And I just loved them. And I didn't care if they were going to come or go, but I just loved them. And I loved to hear their stories. And I loved to look into their eyes and see love there. And as they would tell me their stories, I would start to see the threads of who they were and what they were about and what their potential was. And it just blew me out of the water. I started working with some gang kids in Denver. Somebody noticed that I was good at talking to these kids and getting them to tell me their stories. So they hired me, and I started working in stories ever since. And then I wrote a book that was supposed to be fiction. It was called Skinhead Confessions: From Hate to Hope. And I'm writing about this fictional character that I had made up in my mind because I had a dream, and it was really incredible scenes, even eye color. Like, I had the makings of the most incredible novel about a skinhead who is deeply entrenched. But then something happens. He changes his life, and then he teaches kids to stay out of gangs. So I'm working on this novel that felt like it had been inspired. And then I come across this guy's website, and everything that I had written about in my fictional novel and everything that was on his website were in tandem. And I found out that the hero of my story was real. And on the bottom of his website, he says, "Oh, by the way, I'm looking for someone to write my life story." And I thought, now this guy really will think I'm crazy. Um, but we ended up working together, and that book changed lives, got kids out of gangs, got adults out of gangs in prison. I saw the power of story to change the world, and I became addicted. And I've just been working on stories across the table ever since. It's been extraordinary. So some of my subjects have been seen on Oprah and Dr. Phil and CNN and Good Morning America, History Channel, Paramount Plus, Netflix. But what's really incredible is how transformational these stories are, and what happens, as you know, when we get into the heart of who we are as humanity. And so I'm so excited that I get to do with you. You've done over 900 podcasts. You understand the power of story and these inspired journeys. And so I'm just delighted. Will you tell us about you and tell us why stories have been so important in your life, that you're doing this level of work?
Yeah, thank you. And what lessons we've learned from your story. I didn't known you for a while. You hear a story from somebody, you learn so much and you get educated. So thank you. It started at 18 years old. I was playing, high school got done. My family launched a health club, and I was going to go play junior college or community college football. And they said, "Hey, you need a summer job? Come." My cousin Jeff said, "Come work for us." And it was interesting at 18, 19 years old, and you're at the front desk checking people in. These are people are 40, 50, 60-year olds. Some of these are very wealthy people, very influential people in the city. And I became friends with them. They became taking me out to lunch. We had a restaurant next door. "Hey, Steve, let's go to lunch." And they would educate me. They would inspire me. They would give me all these resources because I was just kind to them. Just saying, "Hey, Tony, welcome to the show. Welcome to the health club. And Tony, have a great day." And those conversations turned into, "Tony, how was your son's wedding? Hey, Jim, how was your trip to Bali?" Whatever it may be, where your conversations, your stories start changing. And I just grew so fast, stayed with the health club for 20 years, became a director. But I met so many people learning their stories. and treating them with a servant's heart, which is my podcast, Doing Business with a Servant's Heart, that when we left the club in 2000 and sold, one of the members reached out, again, my network, I believe your network's huge, said, why don't you come run a restaurant with me? I was like, I know nothing about restaurants, but I'm laying around watching Oprah. This is 2000, not doing it because I had no resume. I wasn't sure what my next venture was going to be, what journey was going to take. So I said, yeah, absolutely. So what was really cool is he comes aboard, and I invited everybody from the health club that I met, and it's thousands of people. There was a joke around the health club. They said, Steve, if you got married, you'd have to rent out the Candlestick Park where the 49ers play because thousands of people. I never did that on it, but we laugh about it all the time. But I would tell people, email them, see them somewhere, run into them somewhere. Hey, I've launched a restaurant with the owner, Jim. Why don't you come visit me? Within 6 months, we were the fastest growing restaurant in the block.
Oh.
And he's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm just inviting people. And one of the cool things about a network is every Monday I would send to a large email list, here's our specials for the week. So we were top of mind. That connection, network, building a business, scaling your business is so cool doing it that way because it's fun. And then we quit that. I quit that after 3 or 4 years. And then I launched my own company. And I went back to the people I met at the restaurant. I went back to the people I met in the health club. And I had $250,000 in the bank in 6 months with 2 employees. I'm like looking at like, what the heck? This is really cool. I'm like, this networking thing and serving people, treating them with kindness really does work. And that's where the podcast started. October of 2022, one of my clients for a business I was selling, he said, have you ever thought about a podcast? I said, yeah, I've thought about it, but I didn't have time to DIY. I'm too busy, looking, to grow and do different things. He said, this guy's launching a coaching program. Why don't you jump in? Josh Tapp, shout out to him. October 4th, 2022 was our first meet. We were doing a mastermind coaching every Tuesday. And my first question was to him is, I'm so excited. What do I do? He said, just record. And I did that. I went to my network again. Audience, think about it. Went to all those people, like 20 people. I had 20 shows booked already. Again, everything in your life is done with community and network. And I started realizing people started introducing me to Lee Steinberg, who is a multi-50 million, $100 million sports agent. Troy Aikman, all of you recognize, he's the announcer for Fox. He was his agent. Jerry Maguire movie. That movie was based on his story. He's on my podcast. Ivan Meisner, founder of BNI, who's a multi-billionaire, on my podcast. I've had NFL athletes retired. I've had celebrities, Roy Firestone, who was best friends with Muhammad Ali. And I'm going on and on. The point is, what I learned from my network is you're going to get referrals, but now you can scale. Instead of having a nice podcast with my clients and people I know, now I'm meeting these people. These successful billionaires and millionaires started teaching me and want to partner up with me. I am right now in the process of building a smart city with about $500 million that me and my partner are part of. That came through the podcast, meeting these billionaires and getting into their network. And I love podcasting. I have gotten off my diabetes medicines because of my podcast. I've learned about business because, as you know, when you do you're going to know when you do a podcast, we get to know them deeply. We get to ask questions, their passions, their challenges, their desires, what makes them tick. Hey, and then afterwards, the magic happens. Hey, Lee Steinberg, can you give me a couple of NFL athletes to be on my podcast? Absolutely. What a great podcast. Well, my network starts building. Peter Samuelson, shout out to him, another wonderful. He's become a friend of mine. He's the producer for Revenge of the Nerds, that movie that's a funny as heck movie. He's become a ton of referrals. And the point I'm making here, audience, and Bridget, is it's powerful to connect and tell stories because the stories lead to so much more, not just education, motivation, inspiration. It leads to connections, referrals, growth, scaling, all that. And that's why I'm super excited of co-hosting this podcast with you.
Me as well. I mean, what an incredible journey you have been on. And I love the business and leadership with a servant's heart that you bring. And then you build community, which is fantastic. And that's what stories do, is they build community. It's incredible. It's why I became a story coach, why I became a mentor and a publisher. And the stories that come across my table, like the stories that come across yours and now ours, are so exciting. Just so much richness of people and transformation, and just the varied backgrounds that we get to showcase here. And I think it's really wonderful because people have been telling stories since around the campfire, eons ago. And it's how we learned roles and opportunities and what was possible. And now to be able to do this, especially you and I talked about in our country, there's been a lot of us versus them. And you and I both know that when we get down to the basics of storytelling and humanity, we find what things we have in common. We find business opportunities, we find relationships, we find best friends for life. It's incredible. So I really feel like this podcast is going to be incredible for anyone who really loves just gut honest, down to earth stories that can motivate and inspire you on a day-to-day basis.
And that's a great way. I'm going to end with this. Wow, I'm excited because of that. But I was at a sermon at my church about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and he talked about the table. And audience,
Mm.
think about this. When you're at the dinner table, how many stories? The stories of the day, the stories from the TV, the stories from the radio. How many times a coffee shop, they're packed. Starbucks is $1 billion company because people go in there to tell their stories. So stories across the table is so apropos because that's what we're doing. What is that story that you're going to tell across the table? In this case, it's a virtual table. It's not an actual table, but a table you can pull up your podcast, your YouTube channel, and listen to these. And here's the last thing I'm going to leave you with. I talked about networking. Here's the power of podcasts, and our podcast, especially with you as a co-host, Bridget, is their gifts of impact. And what does that mean? You listen to a podcast and somebody talks about um, the failure. They're at rock bottom and are now multimillionaires. I just had a guest on last week. I shared that with somebody that was struggling. They reached out to me and said, I have more hope now than I ever have because they heard that story. Did I impact that person? Absolutely. Was it a gift? Even more so. So, audience, use these, our podcasts or any others, use them as a gift. I am super excited. And with that being said, I want to thank everybody for watching. Hey, look forward for our first episode coming really soon. I'm super excited. Any last words, Bridget?
No, except for you to believe in the power of your story to change the world. That's what we're both doing, and we're inviting you to do the same.